the big question for me is, are the learners thriving? I mean, are these routes that lead some places? There's been criticism in other parts of the United Kingdom that actually they don't always do that. So is it working for young people? Is it too soon to tell, not to pull the plant up to see if the roots are taking? Give us a sense of where it is in terms of take.
So I think the measures that both Northern Ireland and Scotland have for themselves, if you like, use what in Scotland is called positive destination. So if you go on to a job, if you go into further study, if you go into voluntary work, that is seen as a positive destination and therefore success. It's not the same terminology, but similar measures of success in Northern Ireland for young people. We find that in many ways those are not ambitious enough. So around about, I think it's a quarter of young people that are in work in Northern Ireland, just under, are in insecure work. And we know that insecure work may well, and if not, be more likely than not to lead to insecure careers. So we've had a recession, the financial crash of 10, 11 years ago now. That didn't lead to the unemployment that we saw in the 90s, but it has led to a reduction in job quality, if you like. And so the aim for all of us now in the skills system, probably more so than others, must be to boost job quality. It must be about not just getting people into work, but getting people into higher quality work. So is it working for young people? Yes, in many ways. There are those positive destinations. Of course, a job is better than no job, but that's probably not ambitious enough for our young people. And the other aspect here is that in both countries, or in both parts of the UK, you can leave the education or the skills system very early. So in Scotland, you can leave at the age of 15, and leave at the age of 15, whilst there's an effort, of course, to make sure people go on to something. Again, those ambitions may not be high enough. So there's thousands of what are, of course, still children out in employment in Scotland that may not be very good quality employment. So if you leave the skills system never to return at the age of 15, that really is not good for you as a young person now. But given those disruptions that we talked about, given automation, given ageing, it's not good for the economy, it's not good for Scotland or Northern Ireland as a whole.
Are any of them, or is one of them any better at being good for employers and employment than the other? I mean, do you have a sense of where employers are in the driving seat and actually the economy is improved by the links of the skills system?
So I think in Northern Ireland you've seen some really good innovation between colleges and actually their enterprise body called Northern Ireland Invest NI, it's called. And employers, often it started in Northern Ireland, a particular project called Assured Skills, with foreign direct investors. And so the enterprise body was speaking to these organisations hoping they would invest in Northern Ireland, but what they needed was reassurance that the skills would be there if they did. And what Assured Skills does, run by the colleges in Northern Ireland, is it provides a guarantee to the employer, but in doing so a guarantee to the student, the learner, that after I think it's a 16-week course, they will have the skills needed by the employer, and therefore of course their employment prospects will be much higher. But the crucial thing there isn't just those guarantees, it isn't just the sort of contingent nature of the investment. We will invest public funding if the employer will do something in return in terms of employing the learners. It's also that the employer is there right in day by day, designing the curriculum, delivering the curriculum too. So there's those types of examples in Northern Ireland, and I do think that shows a broader trend that the employers are well engaged into the system, or at least parts of it. In Scotland, I think you look at the apprenticeships, so there's been new foundation apprenticeships created and graduate apprenticeships created, all with a drive to boost employer engagement. You've seen reviews, policy reviews, so there's a what's called a learner journey review for learning between the ages of 15 and 24 to try and get a system focused much more on the learner and the employer rather than the administrative sort of borders within the system itself. And a few others, and all have been driving that employer and learner engagement in the system. Whether they've borne fruit or not yet, I think is an open question. And I think that's one of those foundations. It's great that we've got certainly the system thinking about this, beginning to organise around these missions, around these ideas. But what we now need to do is push on so that we can see that come to fruition.
Mm. I mean, an important driver of all this is really the government policies on skills, employment, young people, lifelong learning and whatnot. And I know that you spoke to politicians in both countries and in different political states. How big a difference does that make at this stage? We're seeing government becoming internally preoccupied, I think, is the phrase.
Well, yes.
Did that make a difference in the countries you were in?
Yes. So in Northern Ireland, of course, parish sharing has been suspended for the last couple of years or so. So the politicians are still there to speak to, but they're not in position, if you like, to make change and to make decisions that in many ways are required. It doesn't mean that all change needs the politicians in place. There are things the school system can do. But for the big significant transformative change, we will need to see that rectified. And of course the civil servants are still there, and whilst they can't do transformational change, they can do some. But Brexit is dominating not just in Northern Ireland but across. In Scotland you do, I think, a lot of the drive through these policy reviews, through the things like the Learner Journey review, the Wood Commission was another one, and a few others. The politicians have been, I think, central to driving that. And yes, that culture, I think, of certainly, not that you need it, but the permission for the system to bring learners and employers right into the heart of it has been given. Again, we now need to take it from there. I think for the big, if there was one or two big sort of findings from the report, from the work, it is that these disruptions that we've talked through already, they mean that we do need to focus on, firstly, the skill system. Skill system needs to have a priority that maybe it hasn't always had in the minds of politicians and others. If you are looking ahead to automation and more generally disruption, then a strong skill system ready to prepare people, ready to respond when change happens. The terms, I'm not sure I like them, but reskilling and upskilling are going to be very, very important in the future. So that's the first finding, if you like. If you're facing these big disruptions, the skill system is one of the most important ways you can get ready for them. Beyond that, it's lifelong learning within the skill system that becomes really important. So yes, we may be letting down young people now, despite having a focus on them, particularly in Scotland. But looking ahead, we can't just focus on young people. We have to focus on young people plus people further up and further into their careers. So a revolution in lifelong learning, it would be, in both Northern Ireland and Scotland, is what we need, so that we're almost working with people throughout their lives, throughout their careers, and so that in many ways people don't leave the skills system.
One of the things that pleased me about the report was, unusually I think, you included the skill system as part of lifelong learning. And I've become accustomed, as they say, to having discussions about lifelong learning and the skill system. So your way of including that, was that automatic? Did you have some sight of hope that actually it can be seen as a whole system and not a system with addenda?
Yes, I think it's very important to see this not in isolation, not in parts. And I think in part you can create a hierarchy which becomes very, very unhelpful to the learner and to what we're all trying to achieve if you do those things, if you fall into those traps. So looking at it as a system as a whole, looking at it from the point of view of what you're trying to achieve here, what also are you facing here, is the reason that we ended up not separating off sort of adult education or community education or lifelong learning more generally from the skills system itself. Because to us it is about, you can't predict what we're going to need in probably even 5 years' time, and there's very little point in trying to pretend that you can. So what you have to do is embed and imbue the skills that people will need, the resilience, for example, the capabilities that learners will need throughout their careers, so that they can help themselves, help the economy as a whole to manage these changes that will be coming. You can't plan it centrally anymore if you ever could.